bodies being found and human remains being found in his backyard in Luzerne County on Mount Olivet Road in Kingston Township back in the early 2000s. He was eventually convicted of killing and torturing Michael Krakowski and Tammy Fassett. Their bodies were found on his backyard. He was acquitted of the murders of a D.A. Keeler and Frank James, whose bodies were also found on the property of Hugo Selenski. And the remains of a fifth person have not yet been identified. We'll be talking about that today as our topic is Hugo Selenski, what's happening with the case, reaction to it, and the impact it still has nationwide, the interest nationwide of Hugo Selenski. He also escaped from the Luzerne County prison shortly after his arrest. He was on the run for a couple of days at least, and then he surrendered. So what was that all about? Was he hiding evidence? What was the deal with that? But Hugo Selenski escaped. That made national news, besides not just the bodies being found, but he was quite the dark character coming out of Luzerne County, northeastern Pennsylvania. My special guest today is Luzerne County District Attorney Sam Sangladocci, who's been in the office now for some 25 years, researching and prosecuting high-profile cases. Luzerne County DA Sam Sangladocci. Also today, Ed Lewis, a reporter, a good friend and colleague from the Times Leader newspaper, who also wrote a book, a recent book that's getting nationwide attention called Hugo's Graveyard, a fascinating read. I still have to read it. It's like some 500 pages. I've seen excerpts of it, so congratulations on your book as you covered the Selenski situation for all these years. Let's start off with, first of all, with DA Sam Sangladocci. Sam, you know, names come up from Luzerne County, George Banks. We have some recent cases that might rise to near that level. But Hugo Selenski, what do you think is the fascination with Hugo Selenski and this whole the whole drama around him?
Well, Andy, I think the initial fascination came because he was one of our very few young and good-looking, charismatic defendants. As you probably remember, you know, the videos of him had young girls showing up at the courthouse. His charisma in speaking to the media, you know, he seemed to give a good interview. When I tell people that he was doing interviews from his jail cell, it's almost hard to believe in this day and age, but that was going on fairly regularly. And I'm sure Ed actually can talk more towards that. But then, of course, his escape using bed sheets from the 7th or 8th floor of the Luzerne County prison is almost cartoon-like. You know, it made him seem like a criminal genius. And then compile all that with then an acquittal for murder, which thankfully rarely happens here in Luzerne County. I think all of those things put together made him almost like a fantasy character.
And I remember, Sam, and I know Ed, when we were covering the many chapters of this dark drama with Hugo Selenski, he always had that smirk on his face. He seemed really confident. He was like a Bonnie and Clyde type character. And I remember covering the hearings, whatever hearing it was, especially when the trial started. In the case of the two men he was found not guilty or acquitted of deaths of Keeler and James, there were females coming from all around the state, and they were asking reporters, "We heard he has a black book. Can we get our hands on that?" That's the kind of personality he had. They seem to forget that he's accused of these horrendous crimes, and bodies and remains were found in his backyard. Ed, you wrote the book. We're going to talk about this for the next hour or so. What stands out in your mind about Hugo Selenski? We spent all those days at the courthouse, the hearings, the searches. What stands out in your mind?
Well, Hugo, he was very confident. He loved the media, and working in the media loved Hugo. As you know, Andy, he always gave the media, reporters such as us, you know, one or two quotes as he during the perp walks in and out of the courthouse. But he was very confident, cocky at the same time.
Do you think that cockiness ended up biting him, and you know what, at the end?
Well, I think his charisma, what Sam said, the district attorney, he was charismatic. If he wasn't a convicted killer, he would be a lovable guy, somebody's best friend. But he had that dark side to him.
And when you talk to people, even now after all these years, first of all, many people know the name Hugo Selenski, but they say that there's still some that don't believe he did this, despite the overwhelming evidence and great case by the prosecution. We're also going to interviewed Lisa Sands, Tammy Fassett's sister, who really, the murder of her sister really threw her life into a tailspin. And she's back on track. She's a strong woman. We'll hear from her in a few moments as well. Now we're going to play a story from 2006. Cecily Mail, a reporter at the time, just some background on one of the many hearings of Hugo Selenski. Can we play that, guys? We can put the headsets on and listen to it.
The latest court appearance for Hugo Selenski was for a May traffic violation in West Pittston. But according to arrest papers and speaking to those who knew him before, Selenski is no stranger to the law.
Did you kill Mr. Kurkowski?
Absolutely not.
Do you know who did?
Nope.
Since finding the bodies of missing druggist-turned-drug dealer Michael Kurkowski and his girlfriend behind his house last week, investigators have found the remains of 3 more bodies on Selenski's property. But so far, he has only been charged with robbery, allegedly firing a gun at Michael Kurkowski Sr. But 28 News has learned more about Selenski's past. In 1993, when he was only 20 years old, he was arrested for drunk driving. He served 14 days in jail. Then, in 1994, he was arrested for robbing the Mellon Bank in Plains Township and sentenced to 84 months in federal prison in Ferreton, New Jersey. While serving his sentence, he was convicted of assaulting a corrections officer and then transferred to a high-security facility in Lewisburg. He got out in 2001 with time off for good behavior. 28 News has also learned Selenski graduated from Dallas High School in 1991. This is a yearbook photo from his sophomore year. And in high school, he worked at Triple B Steakhouse in Dallas. Employees here, as well as others who knew him, say he was in and out of trouble most of his life. Yet Selenski insists he didn't bury any bodies in his backyard, and police have yet to formally, officially name him as a suspect.
We'll find out in court.
Now, again, when you see these file older stories, a lot of things have happened after that. He was eventually arrested for Tammy Fassett and Michael Kurkowski, and then he stood trial and was acquitted in connection with the remains of Keeler and James. You were going to say something there, Ed?
Just with his confidence. I mean, he actually provoked the district attorney at the time, who was Dave Lopez. Dave Lopez is now the Luzerne County Court of Common Pleas judge. But you don't see defendants like that taunting the district attorney. That's the last thing you want to do.
And he was, and Sam, like you mentioned, he has this. We've heard of the term boyish charm and this, almost like male model type attitude. And he played that up. Do you think he was counting on that to get him out of a conviction on that whole persona?
I think there was part of that, but I think one thing not to be overlooked is that while he may have had that during his initial arrest in 2003, his decade or longer in prison, that quickly ran out on him. And what we saw by the second trial, there were no lines of girls coming to see him anymore. In fact, there was almost nobody there. Only at the end of his trial was a lot of his family showed up, and especially in the death penalty phase of that case. So. If he was counting on it in the first trial, it may have lasted. But although the truth is, it was a legal loophole that let him off the hook. By the second trial, that had been long exhausted.
He was now. It's some quick background on the Kurkowski and Fassett case. He had been appeared. Michael Kurkowski was supposed to show up for a sentencing, I believe, at the Wyoming County Courthouse on the providing prescription drugs to people who shouldn't be getting them, including, I believe, Selenski and some of his cohorts. He never showed up. The theory then, from then DA, and he has passed away, God rest his soul, George Skamanik was, and other investigators, that Michael Kurkowski and Tammy Fassett took off, and absconded was the word. A lot of people didn't believe that. I remember being up there. Anyone who knew Tammy Fassett, first of all, with her kids, and number two, Michael Kurkowski, really close to his family. He wasn't the type of guy, quite frankly, that would jump on a plane and go to Italy. So no one believed. A lot of people believe some foul play happened there. And you covered that stuff at that time also. What did you think then?
Yeah, a few days after Michael and Tammy disappeared, Tammy was a waitress at a donut bagel shop in right outside of Tunkhannock. And I have a lot of friends from high school, years later. This happened years later after I graduated from high school, that worked at the Procter & Gamble plant up there in Mehalshick. So they would commute from Luzerne County up to Wyoming County, and he would stop at Tammy's, where she worked as a waitress, to pick up a coffee or a donut or a bagel. Well, a few days after Tammy and Michael disappeared, I got a phone call from one of my friends who worked at the P&G plant. Stopped in, Tammy hasn't been seen for a while, told me, there's something going on here. can you call the district attorney, George Skomatic, at the time? And I remember calling Mr. Skomatic that day when I got a phone call from a friend of mine that something's going on. And I specifically remember Mr. Skomatic telling me, well, if he doesn't show up for his sentencing hearing, which was May 12th of 2003, a capios will be issued for him. If, as a reporter, he wanted to do more,
Right.
He asked the district attorney of Wyoming County, George Skomatic, I'm hearing stuff, something's going on. Tammy would never disappear. She had two children. Michael Krakowski, disappeared with his girlfriend, Tammy. And I often wondered if Mr. Skomatic would have contacted the state police up there in Tunkhannock. Hey, can you look into this? I got a tip from a reporter. Something's bad happened to Tammy. It could have been, I don't want to put words in his mouth, the late George Skomatic, but Hugo would have been caught sooner than later. I mean, that's what I believe.
They probably couldn't have saved Tammy Fassett and Michael Krakowski. They were probably already dead anyway.
Yes.
At that point, sad to say. Sam, what do you think? What do you think is still, or then, Hugo Selenski's motive for all this stuff? You see his track record before that. He was already in trouble. You think we learned a lesson? Was he just overconfident, cocky, or he thought he was smarter than people? Still thinks he's smarter than people? The investigators?
That's a good question. So the motive is clearly greed. As bank robbery prior to this, Michael Krakowski was well known. The reason he was arrested is he was dealing opiates out of the back of his pharmacy for cash. So he was known to be, awash with cash. The fact that, greed is the motive wasn't really ever a mystery. I think what eventually, the case comes down to, if you actually look at the facts in a big overview, although he thought he was pretty smart, he left 2 entire bodies buried 11 yards from his bedroom window. I mean, that doesn't scream genius to me.
Right, and we were amazed. And I remember that day when they found the bodies. We're in the newsroom, and I know all of us, we're all going about our day, and we start getting tipped off that there's an army of police at Mount Olivet Road in Kingston Township, Hugo Selenski's house. I don't think we knew whose house it was at the time. We didn't know whose house it was. And I was actually anchoring the news that day, and we had one of our newer reporters up there, and she didn't know, because she just started, who the players were. And I said to her, no offense, have her move out of the way, zoom in on the camera, let me just see who's there. And I won't mention names, different people who were movers and shakers and players from everything, DA's office, state police, Kingston Township police. I think Jackson Township may have been there also, but there were a whole bunch of police, people in suits and things. And when in the corner, I said, this is more than, sad to say, one or two, there's something Armageddon going on here,
So I can recall that day very vividly, having been in the office. I was very young at the time, just joined, in fact. And,
You're still very young compared to me, that's for sure.
Well, thank you. Sometimes I don't feel like that. But literally, the office was a ghost town. I mean, everybody was gone. So, I remember joking with the receptionist, I hope they don't come back to me in a couple of years and ask me to read 10,000 pages of discovery to learn what's going on here. And the truth is, they found remnants of 5 bodies, as you know. We had information that there could be as many as 12 or more. I later found out that some of the bones that were burned and chopped in the burn pit were actually in garbage bags on the garbage truck. We had to stop the garbage truck, so Lord knows how many trips the garbage truck may have taken. And lo and behold, fast forward a decade, Stephanie Salavantis ends up winning an election, and the entire prosecution team changes. And I'm now back on the prosecution team again, starting back where I left it in 2006 or 7, whenever the first trial was. So it was a very eerie day in the office, and then came full circle back to me.
We're going to talk more about this for sure. Also, we have some, I believe, never before seen video from the scene and pictures coming up courtesy of the DA's office. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. And we're back today. We're talking about infamous and notorious killer Hugo Selenski from Luzerne County, now serving 2 consecutive life terms for the murders of Tammy Fassett and Michael Krakowski in the early 2000s. Their bodies, along with 3 other human remains, found buried in his backyard in Kingston Township, Luzerne County. My guest today, Luzerne County DA Sam Sangaldoci, and Ed Lewis, Times leader, news reporter, really a gumshoe reporter, and also an author of the new book, Hugo's Graveyard. We're going to talk more about that book in a few moments. But Sam, you made available to 2822 News some never-before-seen video and pictures of the crime scene. We're going to start with the video. Describe what we're seeing there.
So this is actually camera footage of the property at 479 Mount Olivet Road where the bodies were buried. You're looking at the burn pit right here where, when people hear that we found hundreds, if not thousands of bones, you get a certain picture of your head, but some of them were microscopic fragments. They were burned and chopped into tiny pieces. Eventually the camera will also pan, I believe, to the graves where really the entire, right there where you can see those holes dug, where the bodies of Tammy Fassett and Michael Kurkowski were laid on top of each other and decomposing, wrapped in tarps for over a year.
And this is how close to his back door or front door? How close were these graves? About
10, 11 yards from, you'll actually see the house in some of these images. It's not very far at all.
So when you think about it, here's somebody who's living his normal life, and I heard he had cookouts and parties in the backyard. All these things were in the back. We know of 5, maybe there's more that we never could track down, but this is happening and he's just going about his daily life.
As you look into this image, you can actually see those white things sticking out are the zip ties that are tying the victims' hands behind their backs. But you are correct. On June 5th, 2003, when the state police and DA's office and Kingston Township get together to execute this search warrant, he was actually having a party at his house at the time. And as police approached and handed him the search warrant, they told him what they were looking for, and he told them he would help them dig, not knowing that they would actually find what we eventually find on this property.
Now, let's, as we keep looking at this video very quickly, now when he said, we'll help you dig, he was probably being sarcastic and thinking, they'll never look right. Was it planned maybe to have the bodies buried there so close to the house, thinking that nobody in their right mind would bury bodies near their house, that it should be in the middle of the woods somewhere?
I don't think it was very well planned out at all. Now that, in retrospect, having learned everything we learned about the case, it was just, there really was no plan for after the killing. I think part of it was his cockiness that he never thought we'd find it, and the truth is we had a number of different cadaver dogs looking for those bodies that couldn't find them. We needed witnesses that saw the burial to point out the exact spot, and then I think it was maybe 11 inches under the soil, which I thought would have been obvious to cadaver dogs, but they didn't find them anyway. We ended up finding them by a witness and a shovel.
Yeah, Hugo did a little bit of effort to try to reveal the buried bodies of Michael and Tammy. He used coal, the natural soil that's there on his property.
Plus, you still see the flies there on the video.
Yeah, plus
My
he
goodness.
sent one of his cohorts to like a landscaping business out there and bought 50, 60 bags of topsoil. But he used coal to possibly eliminate the scent of the decomposing bodies, because Hugo had 3 dogs and he didn't want his dogs digging up the bodies.
it up.
So that's why he used coal.
It's like a horror movie. Sam, let's, Allison Price and Joey Dominic, can we run the video of the pictures of the bones that, again, the DA's office made available for this program? Describe what we're seeing here, Sam, if you can.
So this is from the scene, photographs of what was eventually found. You can see this is the property from Hugo Selenski's as they were doing the search warrant. Eventually, we collect evidence. In this envelope, there's parts of clothing these are the remnants of some of the victims, Frank James and Adia Keeler, who were said to be wearing clothing. And we found buttons and zippers in the burn pit that were the only remnants left. You can see that they're marked. These are bones found from the burn pit as well. And as I said, there were thousands of fragments. These are photographs taken during the search warrant. Again, more bones that are recovered. I think we have a lot of pictures of those. What we later learned, we were in the inception of DNA technology, really, and we had sent a lot of the bones for testing. Here's some of the bones that were found with ash in the garbage bags, that the tire fire, because he used tires, it actually burned too hot at that time to get DNA evidence out of the bones, so we couldn't match them with any family members.
And so this garbage bag is ash and bone parts.
He essentially
bones.
shoveled out the remnants of the burn pit and put them in garbage bags and left them for the garbage truck to take.
Now where's that? Oh, FBI narcotics.
We also found FBI placards and jackets that we believe were used or being used to plan a robbery. Obviously, neither he nor anyone staying at his house were actual members of the FBI.
But he was going to pose as apparently plan a robbery and put those items on.
Correct.
Now these are more bones. Sam, the remains of the fifth person. Any leads on that at all, or any possibilities? If you could talk about it.
Yeah, we can talk about that a little bit. So the reason that we say that we know for certain that 5 bodies are located on the property, first of all, we have the decomposing bodies of Michael Kurkowski and Tammy Fassett. We also found brain matter on the garage that was a DNA match to the victim, Frank James, in the first trial. And lastly, we found 3 left mandibles. So we don't necessarily even know because we couldn't DNA match the mandibles to say that they're from Frank James and Adia Keeler. They could be from other people. But we can say that we know for certain at least 5 bodies because you only have 1 left mandible, which is a jawbone. There are 3 of those plus the Kurkowski and Fassett bodies.
I can't even comprehend, how do you do an investigation like this? You found bodies are bad enough. At least you could track it down, DNA, and maybe even recognize or have some kind of obvious identifying object there. But where do you start with the bones, especially when they're burned like this? So in the beginning, you didn't know if you can match DNA, correct? So you had to go through a process?
Right. It's basically good old-fashioned police work. You got to get witnesses. Who did you see here? Who went missing? And a lot of the times, if you're targeting people that are transient, nobody's actually looking for them. So you may not even know they're missing for weeks or months or years. And that seemed to be the case. Fortunately, the family members of Frank James and Adia Keeler, we were able to identify them and say, they did say we haven't had contact with them in quite some time. So that's how we identified them eventually. Again, good old-fashioned police work identified blood spatter on the garage door, the detached garage, and we were able to identify that and match it to one of the victims.
Now, he was convicted of, obviously, with the Fassett and Kurkowski murders. Keeler and James, basically, if you can, Sam, and you're saying brain matter, he shot them when they left his house, correct? He shot them right there between the house and the garage?
Correct. So on the day of the search warrant, another one of his cohorts comes forward. He gives us the story of what he witnessed on that day and had participated in that homicide, actually. And he says that one of the victims was shot in front of the garage door, and that is what resulted in the brain matter actually being on the door. The other was held hostage inside of the garage for a while until he was eventually shot and killed. Then they were brought to the burn pit and burned and chopped up and disposed of.
And you talk about this, I'm sure, in your book also. What's your understanding of how this all came together?
Yeah, Hugo, he targeted these 2 individuals a day Keeler and Frank James because they were street level, small level drug dealers, crack cocaine. So Hugo wanted to, his intentions were to rob and Keeler and James of their crack cocaine and whatever money they had on them. So that was his intent.
Was he connected, and I'll ask just to both you guys, was he known in the drug world like as a guy not to mess around, but he knew who to reach out to or who might be selling drugs where he can rob them? Was he all about the money, greed?
I think it's more the latter. I don't think that he was famous or anything in the drug world by any means, but he had a pretty good idea of who to target that might not be, might not be looked for, let's say.
And did you have a chance, Ed, to talk to the James or Keeler family by any chance?
Just during a trial.
Just during the trial? And why was he acquitted? You were saying a technical loophole. What happened there? Just to refresh our memories.
So in the first trial, it was charged, as was the second trial, but an open count of homicide, which basically means that the jury gets to determine whether it's first, second, third-degree murder or manslaughter. In the first trial, the verdict slip has instructions that says, you must determine first-degree murder first. If you come up with a unanimous verdict, don't move forward. If you do not come up with a unanimous verdict, in other words, if you're split, you must keep considering, and the judge will instruct you when to move on. In this case, they somehow were hung on third-degree murder and marked the verdict slip, so they had moved past first, even though they were hung on first-degree murder. And on third-degree murder, they entered not guilty. In speaking with jurors later, they said, well, we knew it wasn't third, it was first or nothing. And they got a little confused about some of the instructions, which are probably too complicated to get into. But the bottom line is, by not following the instruction on the verdict slip, he was found not guilty of a lesser included offense, and as a result was acquitted.
Acquitted. I remember covering that, and our reporter was covering it, and no one could believe it. What is your memory of that trial with Keeler and James?
During when the jury announced their verdict, everybody was in shock. I mean, they were slam dunk cases. I mean, that was a story, one of the stories I wrote. Slam dunk cases, that was in the headline. And when the jury announced their verdict, and you question why they reached that verdict, the jury was confused with the jury instructions and the 5 different counts of the open count of criminal homicide.
And Sam, to talk about a recent case, Brian Kohlberger case in Idaho, and we're not going to go too much into that, but he's pleading guilty, or he pled guilty. And if you're a prosecutor, is it a matter of you take the chance, you go to a jury, and something like this happens? I mean, it can happen.
Yeah, anything can happen, and it's important for us to, warn our victims that, despite our best efforts, sometimes you have loose cannons on the jury that you haven't been screened, and there are people that have been on juries that have lied during their questioning and got on there for the sole purpose of hanging up the jury or convincing people to find them not guilty, which is quite frankly not. I have trouble comprehending that. Why would you want to be on it if you're not going to render a true verdict? And I think the largest part of the confusion in this case really came from the fact that his co-defendant, it was brought in front of the jury that his co-defendant had pleaded guilty to third-degree murder. And that's what caused the confusion, that, in order to find Selenski guilty of first-degree murder, they had to find that he pulled the trigger as a result of a lot of legal hurdles that we went through during the course of pretrial hearings. And
we all know with social media, we're all, Monday morning attorneys, Monday morning doctors, Monday morning quarterbacks. But unless you do it and are trained in that way, your perspective is different than any of ours or whatever. We're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about Hugo's graveyard, but also we're gonna hear from Lisa Sands, Tammy Facet's. We'll talk to her. We'll listen to her first, what she had to say about the case and how it still haunts her, how it really devastated her life, and how she's trying to move forward, and what she had to say, if anything, to Hugo Selenski. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Andy Mehalshick with 2822 News. My guests today are Luzerne County District Attorney Sam Sangodoci and Times leader, reporter, and author Edward Lewis, who wrote a book called Hugo's Graveyard. We'll talk about that more in depth momentarily. I said at the outset, we're talking about Hugo Selenski, infamous, notorious. I even hate to use those words sometimes because we're giving somebody who killed at least probably 4 people for sure. Maybe not. Being acquitted, I got to point out, it's like O.J. Simpson. Being acquitted doesn't mean you're not guilty. And
The
that's-
difference between
right, Sam?
not guilty and innocent is as wide as the ocean. So,
Right,
yeah.
there you go. And of course, the prosecutor's perspective is really the one that matters because you know stuff the public doesn't know. And I'm learning stuff. This is a decade or so after the case, after the trial, a decade, and almost 20 years, more than 20 years since the bodies were found and Fassett and Kurkowski went missing. And I'm still learning more about the case. Stuff that you guys knew back then that the public didn't know, you know. I interviewed Lisa Sands, Tammy Fassett's sister. Now, again, Tammy Fassett and Michael Kurkowski were boyfriend and girlfriend. Hugo Selenski convicted of murdering them and then burying their bodies together in his backyard. I talked to Lisa Sands. Here's how that interview went. That something was wrong, that Tammy just wouldn't take off. When did you realize something bad probably happened?
When she didn't show up on May 3rd, 2002, to pick Jonathan up to go back down to Mike Kurkowski's house for a birthday party for that weekend on Friday, May 3rd. It was the 3rd, and she was coming at the house when we lived over in the blue house over there. And she said she'd be there between 4 and 5. Well, when it got 7 o'clock, I kept calling Mike's house, and all day Saturday I kept calling. Nobody answered the phone. So finally by Sunday, Mr. and Mrs. Kurkowski called me and wanted me to come down to Mike's house. I said, well, I don't know where it is. And they gave me directions and stuff, and they met me by right there in Dallas where the light is by the high school. Mr. Kurkowski met me by the bank there, and we went over to Mike's. And they showed me everything that they found. The door was propped open, the garage was open. Tammy's car still sat there with papers on the front seat and a check. And then I went into the house, and the video recorder was gone, and so weren't all the tapes. But her jewelry was still in the bedroom, her makeup was still in the bathroom and everything. And I knew she wouldn't leave without taking her kids. Her kids were her life. I mean, my goodness. Dustin, I think at the time was 16, if I'm not mistaken. And I think Jonathan was 6 or 7 at the time. But I knew she wouldn't leave her kids.
When did you find out that she had been murdered? When did you find out, and what was your memories from that time?
Not until 13 months later after I reported her missing, 2003, in June on the 5th, when Hugo was arrested and Paul Weekly, when they were arrested.
Did you know Hugo Selenski? Did you know him?
No, I did not. I didn't know him at all. But he looked like a shyster to me.
Did Tammy your sister ever mention him to you?
No, she did not. No, she did not.
When you heard about the details, the graphic details, what happened to Tammy and Michael Kurkowski, when you hear what happened, can you put that behind you, or does it still stick?
No, it still sticks in my mind. When we had the preliminary hearing down there in, is it Trucksville? Past Shavertown.
Shavertown,
Yeah, right down there. They showed the pictures and everything, and I got sick to my stomach. I puked right there on the floor. They had to call a recess and stuff and had somebody clean it up. And my little sister ran to the bathroom. And it was very graphic to see the flex tie around her neck and her hands tied behind her back and the feet tied together with the flex ties and wrapped up in a comforter when they dug them up and everything. As a matter of fact, we saw it on the news where we lived before the state police even came to the house to tell us about it 5 hours later. So we already knew about it.
On Mount Olivet Road when you're digging up the remains
Yep.
up there.
Yep, that's what we saw on the news.
When you saw that on the news, and we covered it extensively,
Mm-hmm.
did you think at that point, before the state police contacted you, that it might be
Yep.
your sister?
Yep. My little sister and I were down to Hoof and Pond Jeans down there in Dallas, right there off that side road. And we saw the state police, the coroner's van, the forensics units and everything fly right on by. and everything I had in my hand at the time, I dropped right to the floor and I told my sister Sandy that I said, we have to go, they found Tammy. I knew in my gut, I just had that gut feeling. It took me 30 minutes to get from there over to that blue house where I used to live with Tammy. And it was already on the news by the time I got there. And it took them 5 hours to finally come and tell us that it was her.
Do you think Tammy had any idea what Hugo Selenski was about, or do you think she was in the wrong place at the wrong time? She got caught up in it.
Yeah, I think, well, she was finally happy with Mike. I mean, after a divorce, and we moved in together over in this blue house over here. And then she met Mike because she was working down at that bagel shop in Tunkhannock at the time. And she met him, and they seemed to get along fine. He gave her whatever she wanted. She was happy. At least I thought so. I mean, she always sounded happy to me when she was down there and called me and stuff. And no, she never mentioned Hugo, Paul Weekly, or any of that stuff. Never.
Let's fast forward to trial. It was really a graphic trial, of course.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think? What's your opinion? I think I know the answer. Hugo Selenski.
He's a smug son of a... I'm sorry, he is. He shows no remorse or anything for anything he's done. And he's probably done this his whole life since he was a little kid. Probably killed the animals and everything just to watch them die and stuff. So doing what he did to Mike and Tammy was really gross and disgusting, as far as I'm concerned.
Did you think there was any possibility, based on the evidence, that he might be acquitted of this murder? Were you fearful that he might be found not guilty?
No, I was never worried about any of that.
When the verdict came out, what did you think?
That I could finally put it behind me, but it took a long, long time, Andy. It really did. I drank and drank and drank like there was no tomorrow. Absolute by the gallon on ice. I used to take my coffee cup down to the state police barracks when I would meet with Gary Capitano full of vodka and ice. That's how I got through it. I mean, there was no other way to get through anything like that. It was so profound and disgusting that I hope it never happens to anybody else. I mean, I watch all these crime shows on Oxygen and stuff, all the things that happen to other people and stuff, and you pray to God it never happens to you. But when it happened to me, my family, the way that happened, I was disgusted. I really was. I don't know any way to put it.
One last question. There's a chance that Hugo Selenski will see this interview. What, if anything, do you want to say to Hugo Selenski?
I want to know why. Why did she have to die? Just because she was at Mike's house when he was there? I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. She was an innocent bystander through all this. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I just want to know why. And I would love anything to wipe that smug smirk right off his face.
Okay, Lisa, thank you for your time, and I hope you find peace moving forward.
Well, she's right over there in the china hutch. That that green marble urn. That's her. She's always with me.
So she's always in your presence.
Yeah, and her candle's there with her picture on it. I mean, I got a picture of her and her two boys in on my bedroom wall. She's always with me, and she always will be. She was my best friend, not just my sister. In 1985, in February, I had my daughter, and then in June of '85, she had her son. I mean, that's how close we were. We were best buds. And everybody in school always used to say, the principal, the teachers, why can't you be more like your sister Tammy? I said, well, I'm not my sister Tammy. I'm my own person. That's the way it is.
And that's the way it's going to always be.
That's exactly right.
Lisa, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Andy.
Thank you. You know, you could see and feel her pain even after all these years. Sam, what do you think when you see an interview today?
So I think a couple of things. You know, what stands out immediately is I think we often forget that these murders happened in '02, and the Kurkowski and Fassett trial doesn't happen until 2015. So these family members, you know, friends of the victim, had to watch. You know, you remember there was a lot of media hype about it. There was a battle between the trial judge and the district attorney, very public, you know, disagreements with them. They watched the first acquittal happen. That's 2006 or 7, and all of these years, you know, I think we counted one time. There were something like 60 different lawyers and judges involved. You know, this hot potato keeps getting passed. They don't actually see justice until 2015. It's a long time, and in fact, Mr. Kurkowski, Michael's father, never got to see it. He died before it happened. So we were glad to be able to get it for Tammy's sister, Lisa, and also Mrs. Kurkowski and Michael's kids that got to see it. But it just seemed to take forever, and whenever we thought we were on the cusp of it, something else happened that caused another continuance.
It just seemed like it was a nightmare that kept on going. What do you think? I mean, you've talked with her at length, but we'll talk about your book in a moment. What do you think when you hear that?
Yeah, I mean, just watching your interview with Lisa, first time I interviewed Lisa was in October of 2003, and what she told you is, I remember, that's what she told me, that she was at Hoof and Paws. She had items in her hands, and it was around 4 o'clock in the afternoon on that June 5th, 2003, is when she saw state police cruisers fly by this store, and she knew it was Tammy. And it was ongoing, and she dropped the items. So what she told you today is what she told me back in 2003. So, and you're talking decades later, and it still is on Lisa's mind. So she's never going to get over it, but she's a very, very strong woman.
And her kids it's a whole generation of the whole family. We're talking, what, 13, 14 years. It's like being born and going through high school almost. You know, all those years that Tammy and Michael Kurkowski couldn't share with their loved ones. Question, if you could answer, Sam. I remember doing reports on when Tammy Fassett and Michael Kurkowski's bodies were in the back of a car or a truck, and he was in Luzerne Borough. Did they, if you can answer, did they bury them first in Dallas somewhere, Dallas Township, and then removed them, dug them up, and took them to Mount Olivet?
So you'll remember I said before that I don't think Selenski really had a plan, and that is what we later learned to be true in speaking with his co-defendant in this case. You know, the initial story was that they were buried at Dallas High School, and we went up there and searched, and the truth is that they were never there. For 3 days, the co-defendant is driving around with these bodies in the car trying to get a hold of Selenski, who was on, you know, according to him, some cocaine-fueled rant, and, you know, gone, not answering the phone until finally he says, I have to do something with these bodies. He actually had them in the back of his car wrapped in blankets, parked at the Wyoming Valley Mall at some point, parked at a hotel nearby at some point, when they eventually, and at the time they bury these bodies, they don't own this house yet. So they go up to 479 Mount Olivet Road, ask the owner to leave at the time, dig this hole and bury these bodies. I mean, it's pretty unbelievable, but it shows a total lack of, you know, accurate planning. Thankfully, you know, that's part of what helped us catch them. But even that took a year.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, Hugo and his co-defendant didn't have a plan. They went there intending to kill Michael Kurkowski. Tammy, like Lisa said, was an innocent bystander. Tammy was helping Mike do some yard work, getting ready for a birthday party for one of Michael's sons. And they pulled up in a driveway, you know, Hugo and his co-defendant. They saw Michael on a tractor, Tammy using a weed trimmer, and the co-defendant wanted to back out. But Hugo intended, they went through with their plan to kill Michael. And Tammy, unfortunately, was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the reason why is because Hugo's girlfriend at the time had issued a check for the down payment of the Mount Olivet Road property that she purchased. And she wrote the down payment check knowing she didn't have enough money to cover the check. So she needed money. And that was April 30th of 2002. So Hugo needed to get money to cover this check that was going to bounce. So that was the reason why Michael was killed.
And did he know Michael Kurkowski, through his drug connections?
Hugo and Michael met through one of Hugo's girlfriends. who was related to Michael, like a cousin, distant cousin. And Michael was loaning Hugo's girlfriend at the time money for like car insurance payment or a car payment or something like that. So that's how Hugo met Michael.
Because by all accounts, Michael Krakowski was a likable guy. He wasn't like the star athlete in high school, but he was the kind of guy that would help you out and maybe an easy mark.
Well, I remember interviewing Mr. and Mrs. Krakowski at their kitchen table a few times. And they even called their son Michael. In high school, he was a nerd. He was a quiet nerd, but he was very smart. He worked at a pharmacy in high school. He wanted to become a pharmacist, and he went to Temple, where he got his 6 years, I believe it takes to become a pharmacist. So he became a pharmacist, and he opened up his own pharmacy outside of Tunkhannock. And that's where he met Tammy.
Wow. Okay, let's talk about your book. We have a picture of the book. Can we bring that picture up there? And then Hugo's Graveyard. Also have it with you. Bring it up in the front there. First of all, what motivated you to write the book, and what's in that book? What can people expect to find in there?
Well,
Cliff notes, if you will.
Well, I covered the Hugo investigation since day one. I remember that first day when the bodies were found, what I was doing that day. And in the days after that, there was early weeks of June of 2003. It was just a media frenzy, trying to get information confirmed. The district attorney at the time had strict orders for law enforcement: do not talk to the media. But it was tough trying to get a second source, as you say, to confirm information. But I covered the Hugo investigation from the state police, the detectives from the district attorney's office, all the hostile court proceedings, court hearings. There was 6 judges on Hugo's case, and it was like a merry-go-round. The judges kept changing 8 times. It went around 6 judges. There was one judge senior judge who moved here to Luzerne County from another county, had Hugo's case, but he got booted like after 3 or 4 weeks because he got cited for domestic violence. But yeah, I wrote the book for 2 reasons. One, because of the many stories that happened with it, to tell the story of how the investigation and the court proceedings in one setting, because it was confusing to cover the escape, how the escape charges got dismissed by a judge, and then it got reinstated on appeal. The attorneys that all represented Hugo at one point, Hugo representing himself at one point. Right. He didn't like his lawyers. But the escape is really what probably put Hugo on the map, that made him known nationally. The second reason why I wrote the book is a personal issue. I coached my daughters in soccer for 14 years at the recreational level and at the high school level. And my daughters were on travel soccer. So when they graduated from high school, I was bored. I needed something to do. And it just kept me busy for 17 months.
Brutally honest, right? Yes. But you had the all-in knowledge. And also, one quick question. The book is also part of a documentary, I understand. We did a story on it a couple months ago. It became a national broadcast documentary. Just
documentary on Crime Nation.
Crime Nation.
On the CW network, yeah. Well, I will tell you something about the book. It was my daughter. It was December 22nd, 2022. My daughter was home from college for Christmas break, and she knew I was bored. And she just goes, it was about 5:30 on December 22nd, 5:30 p.m. She goes, "Dad, why don't you just go down and start writing that Hugo book you always talked about?" I went down 10 minutes later, started putting my files. It took me about a month to put all my files together because there's so many pages that were filed with this. And the next day, December 23rd of 2022, I called Lisa. And if Lisa didn't give me her blessing, I would not have written the book. But Lisa, she gave me her blessing, and it just took me 17 months to write it.
Sam, we're looking at a video of Hugo Selenski. Let's, if we can, guys, talk about the escape. Like you said, Ed, that put Selenski's name on the map. And I remember I did live shot for CNN, MSNBC that time. It was out of control. What do you remember about that, Sam? I mean, what were you thinking as like, of course, people say, here we go, it's Luzerne County. But what do you remember about that?
So on the night that it happened, first of all, I was not assigned to the case at that time. So now I'd just come back from vacation, in fact, and opened up the newspaper, and there's a picture of these sheets, and it says Hugo escaped.
boy.
You have to be kidding me.
Right.
It was literally like watching a cartoon, with all of this happening. And then, of course, the investigation into the escape reveals, they weren't accounting for his sheets. He had amassed something like 12 bed sheets that he tied together, used a broomstick to, dig out and pry the frame off the window, and threw the sheets out, used the mattress over the razor wire. And it was like, for all of these things to happen in one night, it was, pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And then, of course, was gone for 3 days, like you said.
Yeah, that night, Andy, you were anchoring that night, and a WBRE reporter was here, Alexandra Hackett,
Right.
and she was over there, and I was the first reporter there. They didn't set up the crime scene tape yet, so I was standing in front of the steps, and I actually joined in the search because they had handheld flashlights looking in the parked vehicles across the street from the prison. So when Alexandra Hackett, a former reporter at WBRE, came over with the live truck, you were anchoring. You guys broke into Jay Leno, I believe.
It was pretty late. Was it late at night? I believe.
It was
Yeah.
just after midnight.
It was. We were
But
doing our newscast. We got word of something happening.
something
there.
was happening. But Alexandra had me stand next to her in case you threw a question back at her, so she had me to ask.
Right.
But yeah, we saw the bed sheets. At first, when I saw that, I thought it was a rain gutter, and then I saw the bed sheets swarming in the wind.
You have better memory than me asking the question. I don't remember the question from, what was it, 2003?
October 10th, 2003 is when he escaped.
So Sam was interesting, and Lieutenant Krautz from the state police, I remember when Hugo turned himself in. What do you think he did in those 2 days? I mean, he got away. He probably could have been on a lam. I mean, it's hard even then to hide forever. What do you think he did? Any speculation, if you can? I mean, where did he go?
Sure. So what we believe happened, we learned in talking to people that seem to know, although we don't know 100%, is that he had a car waiting down the street, and that I don't know if it's dumb luck or good luck, but there was a traffic stop going on at the time, and he thought that they were already on to him, and that diverted him down the river to relatives' houses where he stayed, went down to Falls, and then eventually made his way back to 479 Mount Olivet Road to see his girlfriend, which is where he actually got on the phone with his lawyer, who convinced him to turn himself in for fear that it might end violently one way or another. And that's actually what happened. 3 days later, he turns himself in from the very property where the bodies are found.
So, if you can answer it, any possibility of him wanting to escape because he wanted to hide evidence or get money from somebody, or just don't know?
Yeah, I don't think his initial plan was to have to go back to jail, that's for sure. So we don't have any information that there was evidence to hide, at least not in the areas that he was. And with all the evidence we found, it would be hard to believe, We pretty much had a lot of evidence from the search warrant. It was too late to hide that.
Well, maybe the district attorney can confirm this today since he's here with us. But there was always word that Hugo had money hidden in a PVC pipe at the property, and he was going to go back for that money
And maybe take off.
and take off. But I wasn't able to get that confirmed, but I don't know if Sam can confirm that today.
We had
that
heard
rumor?
that rumor as well, that there was a stash of money somewhere. But, we have accounted for much of the money. In fact, I think he overspent. I don't think he had a whole big savings in case of emergency. So I don't believe that to be true. But we had heard those same rumors. I don't know where they came from. It wasn't evidentiary.
Now, if I remember correctly, did he, when he called to turn himself in, did he say he'll turn himself into Lieutenant Krautz? He was one of the first people he requested, if
That
you
I
remember
don't know.
individually.
I don't know the answer to that.
Now, Demetrius Fanek, Attorney Fanek, was a defense attorney. That night, when he turned himself in, he was some inside baseball. He was at WBRE TV to do a live cut-in, I think in the evening or something like that, to urge Hugo to turn himself in. And we agreed to say, listen, we're balanced right down the middle of the road. We don't work for, we're with the good guys for sure. But he called, he said, can I make an appeal? Because we were obviously concern was, can it turn violent? Is he holding someone hostage right now? There was we already know what he was accused of. Demetrius Fanek was with me on the anchor desk. We're ready to do a live report, a live cut-in the evening. And back in the day, his alphanumerical pager went off. I think it was alphanumerical. And he made a call, and he said, I got to go. And I said, well, I'm going with you. And we ended up, I didn't go, we sent somebody else.